Hi, I am Prashant Kumar Pradhan from the Department of History of UN Autonomous College of Science and Technology. Today, I am taking a class for the +3 second year honors students for semester 3. The topic is History of India part 3 from 750 to 1206, and this is the first unit and first chapter, that is studying the sources of early medieval Indian history. And you know that we have only two sources, that is literary sources and other is archaeological sources. Today we will discuss about only literary sources. You know, we have the time span from 750 AD to 1206 AD. Why we have taken these years, I have to explain briefly. By 750 AD, most of the dynasties in India were no more powerful. We have seen that by 750, those dynasties who were very powerful in before decades, they had already seen their downfalls. Most importantly, the dynasties of Harshavardhana and the Chalukyas of Badami, and also the Pallavas of Kanchipuram of Tamil Nadu. They were no more powerful, and new dynasties came. New dynasties came in the name of Rashtrakutas, in the name of the Palas of Bengal, the Gujjar Pratiharas of Kannauj, and also there were other kingdoms who came to exist in India during this period. So this period marked a turning point in the history of India, particularly this time, that is early medieval Indian history. I have already told you that the Rashtrakutas, they became powerful in western India, particularly Maharashtra, Karnataka and certain areas. And then we have the Gurjar Pratiharas, they became powerful in northern India till 11th century. We have Palas, they ruled from 750 AD to 1120 AD, followed by the Senas, who ruled from 1070 AD to 1230 AD. A new, but not so new, because the Cholas were also present in ancient period. The Cholas became powerful in South India. They replaced the mighty Pallavas. The Cholas ruled for a long period. In Odisha also we can find the Bhaumakaras, the Somavansis and the Gangas. They ruled for more than 500 years continuously, and they have their own achievements in political field as well also in cultural field. So we have to see vast number of dynasties who were ruling over different parts of India during this period. It is believed that around 20 to 30 dynasties ruled over different parts of India. So there was no a pan-Indian dynasty, what we can see in the name of Mauryas or even in the name of Guptas. That means there was no single pan-Indian empire in India. The Indian subcontinent was divided into different kingdoms, and they were fighting among each other. We can also see that during this period, we have the invasion of the Arabs. For the first time, the Arabs invaded India. They occupied the Sindh province, which was under king of Brahman Shahi dynasty. And consequent years, you will see that there were invasions from northwest portion of Indian territory, where we can see that the Muslims, they invaded India. The most important invasion was taken place when the Mahmud of Ghazni, he invaded India for more than 17 times, and then the Mahmud of Ghor, he invaded India, and his general Qutbuddin Aibak became successful to establish the Muslim rule first time in India 1206, the slave dynasty. So today we will discuss about literary sources. Literary sources are of two kinds, mostly that is your religious literature, and others are secular literature. There are also chronicles or travelers account who came to India for travel purpose from foreign countries. So these three sources, particularly the religious literature and the secular literature as well as the travelers account, will constitute the most part of the literary source of this part of India. The religious sources are many, because most of the kings of the time were religious by nature. They were followers of Brahmanism, they were followers of Buddhism, and some were also followers of Jainism. So you will find that most of the kings were Brahmanical in nature, so they supported the scholars of Sanskrit to write texts on religious matters, on philosophy, and also they supported the vernacular literature, particularly the Pallavas of the latter years, and Cholas, even Rashtrakutas. Rashtrakutas supported the growth of Kannada language, whereas the Cholas, they supported the growth of Tamil literature. So many kings, they supported Sanskrit as well as they supported their vernacular languages. So many texts we can find today which were written during this period, which throw light about the social, political, economic and cultural life of the people of that time. We have also the Palas of Bengal, they were Buddhists. They supported the Buddhist scholars. We have Homokaraj in Odisha, they also supported the Buddhist scholars. So we have also seen that the one of the kings of a Rashtrakuta dynasty who was Amoghavarsa, he was a Jaina by faith, and he supported many scholars to write literature on Jainism and also other religious aspects of the time. During this period, you will find that in South India particularly, devotional songs became very popular. What is devotional sources? That is, Bhakti movement came. In South India particularly during the last Pallavas, you can see that there were two groups of saints. One is Nayanaras and the Shaivites, and another was the Alabharas. They were the followers of Vishnu. So these two type of saints, they composed lots of Tamil devotional songs which became very popular. My dear students, you must remember the fact that during these 350 years, from 750 to 1206, you will find that in India almost all regional languages got their birth. They progressed, and ultimately by the end of the 13th century they had their own dialects, they had their own literature, and they became very rich because of the growth of regional languages and supported by the kings. And particularly the Bhakti movement supported the scholars to write to compose lot of devotional songs which became very popular among the people. So today we will start from the Pallavas. Why Pallavas? Because though the Pallavas were no more powerful, but there are some Pallava kings who ruled during this early part of this 18th century, so we cannot avoid them. The Pallava period, I have already told you, the songs composed by Alabharas and Nayanars became popular. The Alabharas, what they composed became known as Nalayam Divya Pravadham, and the songs of the Nayanaras, the Saivas, were Paniru Thiru Murals. And these songs also gives information about the social and religious condition of Tamil Nadu. We have seen the fact that the Rashtrakuta king Amogha Bharsa I, he was a poet and a philosopher. He is regarded one of the greatest scholars among the kings of this period. He was a disciple of Acharya Jinasena. Jinasena was a Jaina scholar and saint. It is believed that the Jinasena influenced Amogha Bharsa to support the Jaina scholars. He was a prolific writer both in Kannada and Sanskrit language. One Sanskrit writing is Prasnotara Ratna Malika. It is written by Amogha Bharsa. And another book he wrote, that is I will discuss when we will discuss about the literature under secular category. During his period, a Arab traveler, that is Suleiman, he came to India. He talked very highly about King Amogha Bharsa, and what he told? He told that Amogha Bharsa's empire was one among the 4 great contemporary empires of the world, and because of his peaceful and loving nature, he has been compared to Emperor Ashoka. Amogha Bharsa supported the scholars like Mahaviracharya, Virasena, Jinasena, Gunabhadra, Sakalayana and Sri Vijaya. It is also believed that in the 9th century, a Jaina poet, Adikavi Pampa, he became one of the greatest writers of Kannada literature. He is known as Adi Kavi. That means he was the first important poet of Kannada literature. Kannada literature is spoken by the people of modern Karnataka. During Chola period, who became very powerful in South India and replaced the old dynasty of Pallavas, you will see that there was a scholar named Nambi Andara Nambi. He was a contemporary of the mighty king Rajaraja Chola I, and his book was Tirumurais. There was another scholar who was also a king of a Chola dynasty. He was Gandaraditya, and another powerful writer of this time was Sekilar, who lived during the reign of Kulatunga Chola in 1130 AD. The most important work of Tamil literature which was written during this time was the Kamban Ramayana, the Ramavataram of Kamban. The Kamban Ramavataram was one of the greatest literature of Tamil literature. Kamban flourished during the reign of Kulatunga III. Ramavataram is the greatest epic in Tamil literature, and it talks a lot of things about the Chola social and religious life. During this period also, particularly at the end of this period, we will find that a new dynasty came in Andhra area who were known as Kakatiyas. Though Kakatiyas ruled in 13th, 14th century, but by the end of this 13th century, these Kakatiyas supported Telugu poet Nannaya Tikana. Nannaya and Tikana, they composed Telugu Mahabharata. Then we come to the Pala dynasty of Bengal. The Palas, they were Buddhist, I have already told you, and they supported the writing of the text, that is Arya Manjusri Mula Kalpa. And another important thing is that there was a scholar, his name was Sandhyakara Nandi. He was a man of 12th century. His writing was Ramacharitam. It is written in Sanskrit, but the poet was the court poet of Mahipala II and Ramapala, and he has written about the achievements of Mahipala II and Ramapala in his book Ramacharitam. Though Ramacharitam followed Valmiki's Ramayana, but actually in that Ramayana the scholar has written about the achievements of Mahipala II and Ramapala of Pala dynasty. There are other things, other texts, religious texts, but we don't have such time to go in detail about all these things. Secular texts. Secular texts are also of two kinds, that is, they are written in Sanskrit and they are also written in vernacular language. The most important text in Sanskrit was written in Kashmir. You will be surprised that in Kashmir there was a great scholar whose name was Kalhana. He was regarded as the first historian of India of that period. His book is Raja Tarangini. Raja Tarangini means that is the river of the kings, the river of the dynasties, the river of the different dynasties who ruled over Kashmir. Another scholar was Somadeva. He was also from Kashmir and he wrote Katha Sarita Sagara. Katha Sarita Sagara was a collection of stories, and these stories profoundly inform us about the socio-political and cultural life of that period, which was taking in North India, particularly around Kashmir. And apart from all these things, there were Chalukyas. You know, the Chalukyas of Badami were no more present, but two Chalukya dynasties were ruling over different parts of Deccan. One was Eastern Chalukya, another was Western Chalukya. They were ruling in certain parts of Deccan. Bilhana was a scholar who wrote a book, Vikramanka Charita. Vikramanka Charita was written about the life and achievements of a Chalukya king, Vikramaditya VI. In Odisha at that time, there was a celebrated poet who was Kaviraj Jayadev. Jayadev wrote Gita Govinda in Sanskrit. It was a very popular book and it was written in Kavya style, and here we can find that at that time in Odisha the concept of Radha Krishna and concept of bhakti was present. Then we will go to Hindi. Hindi literature was also growing during this period. We have a very famous writer, that is Chand Bardai. You know Chand Bardai, who has written a very famous book, that is Prithviraj Raso. Prithviraj Raso is a book which is written on the achievements of Prithviraj Chauhan, who was at that time the king of Delhi and Ajmer. You know that in that book, Chand Bardai has written how Prithviraj Chauhan was attacked by Muhammad of Ghor, and how in the first battle of Tarayan he was defeated Muhammad of Ghor, but in the second battle he was defeated and his dynasty came to an end. Throughout the book, the author, the scholar has written vividly about the heroic achievements of Rajputs, particularly the king of Delhi and Ajmer, the Chauhan king Prithviraj Chauhan. And he has also described about the marriage of Prithviraj Chauhan with Sanjukta or Sayongita, and how the problem created, and how another Rajput king, the father of Sayongita, Jaichand, invited Mahmud of Ghor to attack India. Then we have in Bengali, you will see that this is the time of the birth of a Proto-Bengali. Proto-Bengali means the elementary phase of Bengali literature. At that time in Eastern India, we will find Odia language also had its origin. The Maithili language has its origin. We can see also Bengali also came to existence. And the traces of this origin and growth we can find from the works of different Buddhist Tantri scholars, Mahayanist scholars, and they were many in number, but they composed different books, and the books are now known as Charjya Gitika or Bodhagana Doha. In these Charjya Gitika or Bodhagana Doha, we can find the traces of the origin and growth of Odia language, Bengali language, Maithili language, even Ahomia language. This is the period of also growth of Kannada language. I have already told you that Amoga Varsa, he has written a book on Kannada, that is Kabiraja Marga. This is a landmark in the literary work of the Kannada language and became a guidebook for future poets and scholars for centuries to come. Kabiraja Marga, it is a guide to poets that aims to standardize these various styles. The book references early Kannada writers such as the 16th century to the latter parts of the 13th century. Here you know that at that time the Indian, particularly the Indian subcontinent, was divided into three main dynasties, that is the Rashtrakutas, the Palas and Gurjar Pratiharas. The Gurjar Pratiharas were ruling over North India and their capital was Kannauj. They supported a scholar like Raj Shekhar, who was a court poet of King Mahendra Pala, who wrote Kavya Mimamsa in Sanskrit. Karpura Manjari was his another work written in Sauraseni Prakrit. In Tamil, we will find the Tamil epic Jivaka Chintamani by Tirutaka Devara, Tirutaka Tevara. He was a Jaina saint of the Madurai of the 10th century, and another scholar was Buddhamitra. He wrote Tamil grammar Birasolium. Another scholar was there whose name was Jayam Kundar. He wrote a book Kalinga Tupurani. Kalinga Tupurani is a book which was written during the time of Kulotunga Chola first about a war between Kalinga and the Cholas. We are here when we have already discussed about the Indian sources, literary sources of early medieval Indian history. Now straight we will go to foreigners' account. This period saw the coming of the foreigners to India. We have established trade and commercial relationship between Western Asia and India. You know, this time was the birth and growth of Islam, and Islam provided some sort of cultural and spiritual unity among large number of people in West Asia and Central Asia. And here you will see that the Arabs came as merchants to western coast of India, but when political situation changed in Central Asia, you will find that the Arabs invaded India, particularly Muhammad bin Qasim was the first who invaded India and defeated King Dahir of a Hindusai dynasty in Sindh, which is now in Pakistan. But here we can see that by the end of the 11th or 12th century, there were interests among the scholars and travelers in Central Asian countries to come to India and see what was going on in India at that time. We will see the famous writer and scholar Al-Biruni. Al-Biruni was a supporter and follower of Mahmud of Ghazni. Mahmud of Ghazni, you know, he invaded India 17 times, and Al-Biruni came with him. And Al-Biruni, in his book Tarikh-i-Hind, literary work of Al-Biruni, that is Tarikh-i-Hind, the most important work, here he has talked about the people of India at that time. When Mahmud of Ghazni invaded India, this man who has great knowledge in medicine, logic, mathematics, philosophy, theology and religion, he came to India to learn Sanskrit and studied Hindu religion and philosophy. He also translated 2 Sanskrit works into Arabic. Tarikh-i-Hind was written in Arabic, and it is believed that it was a very accurate description about India, though he has talked highly about his patron, that Mahmud of Ghazni. Another Muslim historian, Suleiman, gave an extensive study of the history of Rashtrakutas of Deccan, and also he has described about Palas of Bengal. An Arabic writing, Silsila Tutta Warik, written in 851 AD, called the Rashtrakutas one among the four principal empires of the world. Kitab ul Masalik ul Mumalik, written in 912 AD, called them, the Rashtrakutas, the greatest kings of India, and there were many other contemporaneous books written in their praise. Besides these two works, the writings of Al Biladuri, Al Masudi, and Hassan Nizami, etc., has thrown much light on Indian history. There is a book known as Chachnama. Chachnama is a historical work about the Arab conquest of Sindh. The book was originally written in Arabic and later it was translated into Persian. An account of Sindh before and after the invasion of Muhammad bin Qasim is highlighted in this book, Chachnama. The names of the places and details of important incidents are mentioned in this book. Kitab ul Yamini in Arabic by Abi Nasir bin Muhammad al Jabrul Utbi is also another book which was written about this early medieval Indian history. Kitab ul Yamini by Abi Nasir bin Muhammad al Jabrul Utbi gave us information about the reign of Subuktigin and Muhammad of Ghazni up to 1020 AD. You know that Mahmud of Ghazni, he was a man from Ghazni and he succeeded Subuktigin. So, Utbi has discussed about the condition of Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Samarkand and other places of Central Asia as well as India and Sindh very vividly in his book. At last we come to Amir Khusro. Amir Khusro was a man of the next time, that is, he is a man of 13th century. But in his books, he has written so many books, but in his books he has talked about the condition of India before his time. He was a scholar in Persia and also he started writing Hindvi. That is, Hindvi was the language dialect which was in practice around Delhi and Ajmer, and it was the rudimentary phase of Hindi language which also became popular around Agra, that is known as your Brajabhasa. Amir Khusro wrote different books and particularly he has written about his contemporary sultans. Particularly he talked about the Khiljis, the Tughlaqs, and he lived for a long period, and all his works he has given information about the condition of India from the 8th century to the end of the 12th century. At last I will give certain points about the limitations of the work. You know, the students, that is, these are the only sources, literary sources. These are written in Sanskrit and local languages. And most importantly, these are written by those scholars who were influenced by their time. The social practices, the prejudices, or the wrong notions which were practiced during these periods, the scholars were definitely influenced. So, the scholars had to see very carefully that these literary sources must be seen in a proper manner. We have oral sources, but the oral sources mostly we can find in the Charanas, the bards of Rajasthan, who sing even today the heroic songs of Rajput heroes, but these Charana songs were of later origin. So, we have to see that the patrons, even the Muslims scholars as well as the Hindu Buddhist scholars, they eulogized their patrons. So we have to see that how much they eulogized. We have to control to see that which are the rational facts to be utilized in historical discussions. We have seen also certain words which have double meaning. In Sanskrit or also in local languages, we have certain words, vocabularies, which can have double meanings. So we have to carefully see that these meanings must be properly utilized. These are the scholars are mostly poets, so they have mostly over imagined when they talked about on their own time. So we have to also see this limitation. Another important point is that when the scholars wrote these books, they were influenced by the calculation of eras which were prevalent of their time, or Sakabda or Guptabda, or which the Chola people followed that their own eras. And these eras were mostly utilized by the scholars of this time. So we have to see that how these eras must be assimilated with this present situation of the time. And last but not the least, students, it is our responsibility to see, if you go through the original sources of this history, we have to see that as the contemporary students, the people of contemporary time, how we see these facts. There are facts which are not similar. When we talk about certain religious groups, there are different opinions, but we have to see that where truth lies. The most important aspect of history is to find truth, nothing but truth. Thank you very much.